Dr. I believe Daniel Perlmutter wrote a book called Grain Brain, where he went over the concept of like we think of like an extreme aversion to to gluten as celiac disorder, but he talked about there's different levels of it. Like a lot, like no one is completely not inflamed by gluten.
Yeah.
And then he goes over the concept of excessive levels of gluten causing plaque on the brain.
Yeah.
And then when I read that, I was like, what else is causing these plaques on the brain? And I was just wondering, like, when I hear you talk about this, it sounds very similar.
Yeah, that's a big deal where this is like things like dementia are completely misunderstood.
Yeah.
So there's a doctor that we did a research project with him. He wrote a book about this called The Reversal of Alzheimer's. And so this amyloid plaque that develops on your brain gets blamed for dementia because our research is in a disease-centric state. We study sick people because the motivation is to make a pill. The pharma industry wants people to get sick and then need that treated. They don't want to ask why. So there's a gene called APOE, which so I used to do work on Marvel movie sets, right? We used to during our research phase. One of the things we did, we partnered with some personal trainers in LA and said, "Give us the best of who you got that already has the best doctors, best food, and let us see if we can get them a little better." Right? Yeah. That's the challenge. So they took us to the Marvel movie sets. We literally were making these custom supplement cocktails for the Marvel stars, right?
Yeah.
And so because we did that work, one of the producers that worked with Chris Hemsworth
was it David Maisel? He's the creator of Marvel Studios. Is that
no? We weren't working. We were working with the trainers, the personal trainers.
Yeah.
So the trainers that were each allocated to a star, right? Yeah. So so there's a gentleman who was producing a show with Chris Hemsworth, which eventually came out called Limitless. It was, I think it was on Disney or Netflix, where he was challenged with all these various things, and we're supposed to do this genetic episode. Let's test his DNA. Then COVID lockdown came. Production got shut down. He was stuck in Australia. Chris decided to pick up a camera and he just shot it himself with a bunch of his buddies in Australia. So they did it on their own. Then I actually watched the episode and he was told, APOE gene, you have an elevated risk of dementia.
Okay.
And that's kind of where it ended.
Yeah.
And I was like, how could you leave somebody with that? Because the anxiety of that will cause the dementia.
Right? Yeah.
And so this gene, a certain version you're told low risk, a certain version you're told 8 to 10 times elevated risk, and another version 17 to 25 times. And that's literally what people are told. And it's like, wait and see and go deal with your doctor. Nobody asked the question, what does this APOE gene do? Right? And the plaque is the concern. So it's a lipid transport gene. It instructs your body's ability to move cholesterol around. So if you have inflammation in your brain, your body is going to use this very useful hormone called cholesterol to go fight the inflammation. It's like a Vaseline that smooths things out, right? If you have some inflammatory toxin that caused the inflammation in the first place, it's also going to oxidize and damage the cholesterol. And then it starts to get sort of left behind instead of removed.
Another mismatch.
Yeah, another mismatch. So now that same APOE gene that's not functioning properly because of a version you have didn't cause the dementia. It was not able to recognize that damaged cholesterol and remove it because it doesn't function properly. So disease-centric research, plaque equals dementia. This gene doesn't move plaque. This is the APOE Alzheimer's gene versus why did you have inflammation in your brain? That's the obvious question. Because if that didn't happen, why would you ever have plaque in your brain? There's no response. There's no cholesterol response, right? Why? Leaky gut. Leaky gut means leaky brain. Toxic substrates exiting your gut wall directly into your brain. Metabolic dysfunction, just like you said about certain breads and grains, right? Causing metabolic state that we were never meant to be in as humans. Stress and anxiety, constant chronic elevated cortisol leading to brain inflammation. Inhalation, this is probably the biggest one. There's a gentleman named Dr. Tom O'Brien who's one of the sort of pioneers of the functional medicine movement. And he said, according to his research, today's dementia, 66% is airborne, meaning the chemicals and everything that we're breathing causing brain inflammation. And the last one, and this is why 80% of dementias in women, is hormones. So the hormones that you make, you can do everything right. And this is where I see a lot of women stuck. I eat right, I breathe right, like everything is right, but I'm still sick. Because you also make toxic inflammatory insults on a monthly basis based on your genes. And those can exaggerate this inflammation that's already been triggered by everything else. So if you look at it this way, you then know the why, the very first thing we talked about, right? And if you know the why, you plug the hole, you take a detour, and the dementia never comes.
But the part that people have a hard time with is it's different for different people.
Yeah.
And your genetics determine that it's different. You mentioned you have one person who runs every day and it helps them. You have another person who runs every day and it's killing them.
Yep.
It makes them look older. And I want to, back to your previous point, I have an autoimmune disorder I developed while I was in the military. They believe it might have been my exposure to JP8, the diesel fuel that's there. And I just around 2012, I started eating paleo, and it went away. They still give me Enbrel for my autoimmune disorder, and they want me to take it every week. I take it once every 6 months, maybe, when I have like massive inflammation and massive flare up in one of my spinal discs and one of my fingers. It gets to the point where it's just like really painful. That's the only time I'll ever take it, like once every 6 months. And the next day I'm like, I feel really crappy. And then I'm back, because it's like a cancer medication, right? And I go to my doctor and I was like, I only need it once every 6 months. And no question of why. I was like, I changed my, but I know you weren't asking, rheumatologist, but I changed my diet to paleo, and now I don't have this inflammation anymore. And I'm like, you want to write that down anywhere? Does that mean anything to you? And I brought this up to him at least 10 times, and it's like it doesn't click, because it's like, stupid patient can't possibly understand what's going on here. And then I'm like, hey, I've read like several books that talk about all this gluten that I'm eating may have been causing this inflammation. Could we do something with this? Same thing, endocrinologist or endocrinologist or urologist. I'll have some of my guy friends will go to them. They'll get their testosterone levels checked, and they're like, "Yes, sir, you're in the normal range." It's like, what number am I? Oh, you're at 200 nanograms per deciliter. I'm like, normal range for what? It's like, no, this is what the normal range is. Like, what if I want to fuck my wife like once in a while? Can I do that at 200 nanograms? What if I want to run a business? Like, bro, what are you talking about? This is normal for me. But to them, it's normal. You check the box. The idea that you're going to let a guy under the age of 35 walk out of there with 200 total tests is, to me, is criminal. It's criminal. I actually am afraid, I know this is way out of bounds of what we're talking about here. I'm afraid that exogenous testosterone has been so effective for men in the last couple years that you're going to start seeing people wanting to make it illegal, because you're seeing 45-year-old men, they're dating 25-year-old women, running a business, working 16 hours a day again, and they're burning fat. You're seeing these older men with six-pack abs again because of some of this stuff. And I think it's giving them an advantage that wasn't intended through natural selection, right? They're supposed to get more docile and back down, and you're seeing the opposite happen.
That pressure's already there. So all the compounding pharmacies are like, there's been raids of clinics that are selling peptides.
Really?
Because they work.
Bro, they do. I right now I'm 5 for 5. I've tried 5 different peptides, and they do exactly. I pulled a groin. I tried BPC 157. Within a week, I was able to go out there. This is the Wolverine hormone. I tried thymosin. Thymosin absolutely positively works. Ipamorelin definitely works. Like, my skin cleared up. Tesamorelin, and I can't remember what the other ones are, but I've tried several different these peptides, and every single one of them does exactly what they say they're supposed to do.
They work, and so now that they're working, and people have an alternative, there's a clinic that I know in Florida that literally the FBI raided and shut them down.
You know what's funny? When you consider the markup on, so if I were to take just anything that got me into better shape, let's say testosterone, whatever, you take some kind of peptide, or maybe you just get on ashwagandha and Tangad Ali, and you just naturally homeopathically raise your testosterone levels. If I do that, I don't need your ED medication anymore. So take that off the board, Pharma. I don't need your anti-anxiety medication anymore. So take that. Oh, I don't need your Lexapro anymore. Okay, I don't need your ADHD medication anymore, because when I got on TRT, I was able to really focus. And my workouts were better. The focus was like, the world became more colorful when I got back on TRT. So, okay, now I don't need your Ritalin anymore. Okay, now all these issues. Now I don't have sleeping problems anymore, because I'm doing hard workouts twice a day. Okay, cool. So now I don't need your sleeping medication anymore. And what am I making testosterone out of? Wild yams. I'm producing it out of wild yams. Do you know what the markup is on wild yams in comparison to what you're doing with Lexapro and Ritalin and all these other things? And so it's like, when you think about this concept of just eating healthy or peptides and testosterone, you'll notice I'm not being sold testosterone by Johnson & Johnson. It's like like you said, some compounding clinic that's going on there, or some guy who maybe was in the fitness industry, he was a personal trainer or bodybuilder or whatever, and they're selling it to you, and it's like, dude, this is a huge disruptor for pharma. I think this is a huge disruptor for big pharma. The idea that you get healthy not using their chemicals, and you're getting healthy using something that's made out of wild yams. I think that's very problematic for them, and I do think we might see that shut down. Yeah,
and we're seeing there's more pressure on the women's side than there's the men's. Because menopause seems to be not a thing anymore, right? Women go through this crazy thing called menopause that they don't need to if you understood the hormone cascade and what leads to these crazy symptoms. So menopause, you have to go through. There's a transition. Does it need to be a roller coaster? Not necessarily.
Got it.
Right? And if you add bioidentical hormones done properly, because the same thing, I'm actually going to tell you a note about the celebrity's mom I was dealing with that was cause breast cancer because of her hormones. So you do have to be careful. But if you get it right, you're sleeping properly, you have proper bone density, you don't have osteoporosis. You know, women will get cardiovascular disease after the breast cancer. You know, most women that get breast cancer actually die from cardiovascular disease because the same thing that triggers the inflammation triggers both. Right?
Got it. Yeah.
And you get so weak, and the energy, mitochondrial function is not there. So all these things that are even just the hot flashes, even just the basic symptoms that there's 80 plus menopause symptoms now, all go away, and you just go through this transition in terms of the fertility, but none of the other roller coaster. Right. So in terms of the breast cancer thing, here's another example. And I only bring this example up so that people know that, yes, hormones, but be careful about what you do. Know that when you add something to your body, that's not necessarily what it stays as. There's genes that instruct, oh, I see this, I need to turn it into something else. So there's this lady who called me, this sort of celebrity person that everyone would know. She's actually an athlete. And her mom got diagnosed with breast cancer. And she said, please figure it out. So what we figured out was she's 52, 2 years into menopause. That's the magic number. So I asked her, did you start hormones 2 years ago? She said, yes. I said, that caused your breast cancer. I'm going to prove to you why. So I looked at her genetic map. She is estrogen dominant. So there's a gene called CYP19A1. She takes her testosterone, aromatizes it into estrogen a little too fast and makes too much. Then there's a gene called CYP1B1 that takes that estrogen and converts it into something called 4-hydroxyestrogen, which is beneficial for some things, but highly inflammatory for most of your body. You don't have a menstrual cycle anymore in menopause. So you're still making it, but not getting rid of it. The body starts to say, well, this stuff is dangerous. I'm going to tuck it away in fat and tendons and ligaments, not to expose my organs to this inflammatory metabolism.
I think before you hold that thought, the idea that your body stores toxins in fats, I think people don't understand that concept. And the idea that your body will take that body fat and use it to aromatize testosterone into estrogen. Yeah. That's another thing. I think a lot of people miss that. They're like, I'm just fat. It's not a big deal. No, that fat it creates an endless cycle where just imagine the 50-year-old fat guy at the end of the bar with the man boobs who's drinking a beer. This is the cascade effect of estrogen converting what little testosterone he has into or testosterone into estrogen. The body fat does it, aromatizes it, and then the cycle just goes on forever, and it becomes progressively harder as his body produces less testosterone and there's less protein synthesis for him to get that body fat off ever.
Anyway,
and
that's why when we're working on weight loss, we take people through stages. There's going to be plateaus because when you burn off fat, you're releasing estrogens and you're going to tell the body to store fat, right? So the people know that the plateaus are normal. Like, anyways, there's things to do about that. But going back to this example, when she added the hormones, what she added was something called estradiol, right? Which is the more potent form of estrogen. Estradiol, when you add it to your body, the CYP1B1 gene directly converts it into the 4-hydroxyestrogen.
It skips a step. It just goes directly there.
It puts it into that bucket, which is the inflammatory bucket, which she now at this age was no longer clearing through menses, but was storing in fatty tissue, which is where do women have fat? It's like bum, hips, breasts, right? So she has this toxic thing being stored in her breast tissue with these glands and ducts that were never designed as a cellular structure to deal with that. And you get this DNA damage and eventually a cancer, right? So she said to me, if that was true, well, then why did I have ovarian cancer in my 30s? And she was just skeptical. So I asked her one question. Were you on the birth control pill? She said, yeah. I said, for how long? She said, 8 years. I said, well, at that time, same exact story. You added estrogen on the top of a funnel that converts it all into 4-hydroxyestrogen. But at that time, you still had reproductive activity. So the inflammation happened here as opposed to here. It's the same exact thing. Right? So knowing that map, and this is so true for men, there's an NHL hockey player I was working with. So I live in Toronto, mecca of NHL training.
Yes.
There was a year, I think it was 2019 or 2018, where there was this phenomenon where all these trainers were calling us saying, my player has man boobs, can you help him? It was the same story for all these guys.
So gynecomastia from excessive estrogen,
Adding testosterone, thinking that, so there was an andro gel pack. That's the tool they were using. Androgen gel gets absorbed in your skin. The thinking is, I added testosterone, I have testosterone. If you have a certain variant in the CYP19A1 gene, there's an instruction. Take it all and turn it into estrogen.
Yeah.
Right?
So that's a specific genetic thing that certain hockey players might have.
Yes.
Other people are going to just absorb the testosterone. It's going to create protein synthesis and et cetera.
For some men, there's a gene called SRD5A2 that converts it into dihydrotestosterone, DHT, the manly man
and
stuff,
then your hair might
lose
fall
your
out.
hair and you get prostate issues.
Yeah.
Right. So we had gentlemen that were getting prostate enlargement because of their hormones also. So, and it's not yes or no to hormones. It's now adding potentially like a fenugreek or a saw palmetto to block that conversion, or adding a DIM to block the conversion to estrogen. So just personalization is key to all this stuff.